Martin Scorsese is undoubtedly cinema's greatest director. With the resume he holds, he can make 5 terrible movies in a row and that will not harm his reputation. For me, he is the greatest filmmaker of all time. For every decade, Scorsese seems to release a classic of a movie. The 70s we had Taxi Driver, 80s it was Raging Bull, 90s Goodfellas, the 2000s we got Shutter Island, and the 2010s we had The Wolf of Wall Street. Scorsese is pure pedigree when it comes to films. But it's easy to forget that mixed with his greatest hits, that Scorsese has made more than just feature films. He has done documentaries, music videos and short films. With a career spanning 50 years, Scorsese has done nearly every genre of movies, and sometimes we miss a few on his resume. So let's take a step back. No, even further. Keep going. Yep, that seems right. This is Martin Scorsese movies you've never heard of. Martin Scorsese has worked with the best actors and actresses to ever grace our screens, but before he created films with the likes of Robert De Niro, Cate Blanchett or Joe Pesci, Scorsese started making movies with the closest people he knew, his mother and father. Italian American was released in 1974, the same year Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore came out in theatres, and this 49-minute documentary is about Scorsese's parents, Catherine and Charles Scorsese, as we are welcomed into their home and they begin to discuss their lives and how their parents came into America. This documentary is very personal and opens up the director's family life, who his parents are and how they lived in New York.
I never remember a Christmas tree in my mother's house. I don't remember it.
That's right, never
I
did.
never remember a Christmas tree in my mother's house.
We had a Christmas tree.
Why?
Well, as I said, they didn't go for it, the old folks. They didn't go for it.
But the focus doesn't lie within Scorsese's parents themselves, but the life of his grandparents and how they came into America to build a family.
Our fathers and mothers, they were from a different world. They were different. They brought us up. As long as we ate and we were healthy, that's all that counted.
This documentary reminds me of times when my aunts or uncles would come over to our family home and just talk about their past and tell my brothers, cousins and myself about how they grew up back in the day. And that nostalgic feeling I get is because we as the audience are welcomed into those very personal lives of Scorsese's grandparents. It is wholesome how Catherine and Charlie Scorsese talk about their parents with such fondness and love.
What were you right about? My father used to smash the grape with his feet
But not with the...
and then put in the thing.
But no, they can't. You mash it once. Oh my God.
Your father didn't have the machine my father had.
Yeah, don't worry. We had machines, all right.
That also comes down to the director Martin Scorsese, who allows his parents to just go off in tangents, making the documentary like we as the audience are there at the table with them. Martin Scorsese's parents clearly mean the world to him, as shown by him giving them countless cameos in his movies.
It's fascinating that he chose to put his mother in all of his films.
She's in his films through his career
Yeah.
until she passes.
Yeah.
She's in Goodfellas.
Yep.
She's in Casino.
Yep.
She's in King of Comedy, but off screen.
Yeah.
She especially shows up when he returns to that world.
And it all started off here, allowing us to be part of the Scorsese household. The way Scorsese and editor Bertrand Lovett intercut with real photos of the Scorseses only adds more personality to the documentary, putting faces to names and allowing the stories being told to breathe on. A technique Martin Scorsese uses in other movies such as Raging Bull.
One of my favorite sequences in all of Scorsese in Raging Bull, them getting married, the happy days.
yeah.
You have that beautiful, beautiful home movie montage,
that's
the
the
rooftop,
rooftop,
with
yeah,
them
yeah,
getting
yeah.
married and feeding each other cake.
For sure, yeah.
He might not have done that if he hadn't made Italian American.
I think the love in this documentary is represented in Catherine's recipe for a sauce, a recipe passed down from her mother and mother-in-law, now shown to us. Martin Scorsese even leaves a recipe and directions in the end credits, telling us that his parents' stories are open and should be shared to the world, just like his mother's recipe. American Boy is another documentary directed by Martin Scorsese and is about Stephen Prince, released in 1978, 2 years after Prince cameoed in Scorsese's Taxi Driver as Andy, the gun salesman. Now, you don't have to know Stephen Prince to watch this documentary about him, because just like Italian American, in American Boy, Stephen just talks about his life so you get an understanding of who he is and what his past was like.
One cable into the fence and he dropped the other cable into the water. And it was a DC generator truck. So it took me about a minute to get to the generator truck before I could hit the switch off.
What happened?
He fried.
Oh, he's dead?
But for me, this documentary is less about Stephen, but the way Martin Scorsese directs him to get the best stories from him. Scorsese just lets shots and silences linger. He allows Steven to tell his story and just holds on him to get more. Scorsese encourages Steven with laughter and acceptance of his words, and coupled with those encouragements, Scorsese directs conversation aflow so that the stories being told never drags along.
When you study people as intensely as Scorsese has, you know how to direct people, even if it's real life, you know what I mean? You know how to direct a moment.
The most fascinating part of American Boy is when Steven talks about how a girl overdosed and he had to stab this woman with an adrenaline shot straight in the heart. Now that sounds familiar, right? Because Quentin Tarantino used that story for Pulp Fiction when John Travolta's character Vince Vega has to do the same thing to Uma Thurman's Mia Wallace.
This girl once OD'd on us. And he looked at me, he says, well, you're gonna have to give her an adrenaline shot. I said, what are you talking about? Needle's like about that big, and you gotta give it into the heart. And you have to put it in a stabbing motion, and then plunge down on a thing.
Similar to Italian American, the stories Steven tells are personal to him, but differently is that this documentary feels less authentic than when Scorsese's parents talked. Italian Boy feels like Scorsese is driving the conversation to where he wanted to go, rather than allowing the conversation to flow as naturally as possible.
Something here about sailing, about an alcoholic skipper and a pitcher.
Again, this documentary is more interesting when focusing on Scorsese and how he dictates the flow and emotions of Steven.
Even him encouraging him laughing and just pushing the story along, it's very much like just it's manipulation. You see why Scorsese was so
in love with him.
You can see this documentary two ways, as Scorsese being manipulative, or you can see it as a great director getting what he needs. The Big Shave is probably the most recognisable title on this list, with good reason. This short film was released in 1967, the midway point of the Vietnam War, and Scorsese in 5 minutes tells a story of a self-conflicting attitude that got many American soldiers killed during that 20-year battle. The film is just about a man, maybe in his mid-20s, shaving, but he keeps on doing it to the point of self-harm. However, the man isn't concerned by the pouring of blood or the scarring to the face. He continues to shave.
When I saw that short for the first time, when you get your hands on it, you don't, obviously we're well past Nam, right? You have to remember that movie in context, you know what I mean? Young men being self-mutilating and things like that.
This is a commentary of potentially the pointlessness of the war, allowing many young men to go out to Vietnam on their deathbed, as the American government turned a blind eye and continued their cry for more soldiers to go into battle. The best aspect of The Big Shave is how Scorsese captures the criticism of the Vietnam War without ever showing the devastation of the war or the ineptitude of the American government. He allows the audience to come up with their own theories about the story. Eventually, at the end credit, there is the biggest clue to this short being about Vietnam, with the line Viet 67 at the very end. But it isn't just the story from Scorsese that captures your mind, the editing of repeating shots keeps the audience engaged, highlighting key moments. This short film shows other filmmakers that you are not defined by the duration, but quality. Martin Scorsese only gave himself 5 minutes to tell his story, and he does it with precise editing and camera work. The Big Shave was a big announcement in the film world that young Martin Scorsese is someone to look out for, and boy, did that come true. What's a Nice Girl Like You doing in a place like this is an experimental Scorsese short that feels like the young director at the time was just seeing what works in regards to how to show a movie. The editing is choppy and at times discoherent, but this is done on purpose because what this early short film tells us is that Scorsese doesn't follow the rules of cinema. If he believes different editing styles or camera angles will create an interesting story, then he will add those elements in.
This guy is already bursting at the seams,
brimming with life.
But also bursting at the seams with all these tools that he wants to use, and all these different ways to express something.
The inexperienced filmmaker shows traits that would define his storytelling ability. The use of photography instead of film is prevalent in this short film. The wedding scene is very similar to that of Raging Bull, a film Scorsese would make 17 years later. What this short tells us is when you are young or even a new filmmaker, you shouldn't be afraid to explore the realm of film. Films and short films are not limited to one style. Film allows every aspect of art to combine as one, and Scorsese uses those art forms in his movies. Photography, painting, music, and of course film itself. I think the playfulness that is attributed to the film is through Scorsese and the crew around him. The photos of the couple at the theme park builds up expectations of a normal sightseeing honeymoon, but then delivers a laugh when the camera pans out to see that the theme park was in construction. This short film might not be a huge statement from Scorsese, but its playfulness to bend the rules of film and to just go for it is admirable. A clear indication from Scorsese that he won't be bound by just one art form, that film is an expression for all styles. Martin Scorsese loves the morally ambiguous protagonist, Travis Bickle, Henry Hill, or Jordan Belfort to name a few of them, and his fascination with these types of characters goes way back to 1964's It's Not Just You, Murray, because this short film shows the tale of an entrepreneur and his dealings with illegal alcohol and organised crime, and Scorsese does what Scorsese does best and blur the line between admiration and glorification of such illegitimate acts. But it isn't just a sense of what characters intrigue Scorsese, but how he tells those stories, because even this early in his career, Scorsese uses narrations to guide the audience.
You need help in trying to obtain for yourself the best possible life for yourself.
However, it isn't that simple. The use of narrations, just like his future films, is to put us at a sense of artificial ease, allowing us to be receptive to the character of Murray, because he explains his wrongdoings like it was just a mistake, meaning we are more likely to sympathise with him. That is a balanced act when it comes to movies about morally ambiguous protagonists, and even this early, Scorsese shows how to create an atmosphere in a film that brings the audience along with the main character's journey. That's masterful directing. Martin Scorsese with this short establishes his nuance with telling stories and how to reel the audience in and essentially make us choose between our own self-beliefs. We know what Murray does is wrong, but the film questions our own morals because we enjoy the scenes where Murray's gin brewery is barraged by two policemen, or laugh at the scene of Murray answering the court's questions.
Is this thing working?
But the trial?
Yes.
Yeah, when it first cuts,
that's Goodfellas again.
When Goodfellas, Irishman,
Is this thing working?
Irishman is also the narration that like you can't rely on. Where like
that style of directing is infectious, and Scorsese continues with that style all the way to Goodfellas and The Wolf of Wall Street.
And now it's all over.
Even this early on, we can see Martin Scorsese building confidence in the voice he has as an artist. What you have seen today is 5 Scorsese films and documentaries that you probably have never heard of. These 5 films show the growth of Scorsese as a filmmaker. We got to see techniques that would become his trademarks and an understanding of how he tells a story. Watching these 5 films gave me a greater appreciation of the craftsmanship he had as a young filmmaker. Martin Scorsese is the greatest director to have ever lived, and through these 5 films we got to see a young man's journey to greater ideas and films. Maybe some of you have watched these films before, but for a lot out there, these have been Martin Scorsese movies you've never heard of.
Is he still taking this? I'll murder you. You won't get out of this house alive.
If this video piqued your interest and you want to know where you can watch these 5 films, click on the link in the description and it will take you to Amazon where you can purchase Scorsese Shorts, a Criterion collection. I will note this is an affiliate link, so if you do purchase it from my link, I do get some money. But I genuinely do recommend trying to watch these 5 films. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.